Hello, welcome pen friends. Welcome to another singles ink profile. Today we're doing Monteverde Moonstone. It is a brown and it looks a little bit different on this paper, but we're going to see it in a minute in several different papers. This is the Cola Ring Index card. It is a brown, it's a little bit complex, and it's really pretty. I think you're going to like it. It's not too dark, so we kind of maintain that brownness throughout. And so I've got here a spread that includes everything, including the bath test, which it did come out. You can't read any of it. It's completely a typical fountain pen ink where it is not water resistant at all. And then let's see, over here is the chromatography. I'm going to have to put that a little closer. It completely moves right away, which kind of confirms this test. And then you get that brown, and then you get, it looks like a little bit of red, and then you get blue. So it is a little bit complex for a brown, and I really enjoy it. So then this is it on Tomoya River paper, just kind of painted on, and you get to see that lighter brown and the darker with the crust around the edges of it. Let's set it back down here. I guess it's off center now. So I had it in 3 pens, the Serendipity with the broad nib. I did look up right away and found that it's widely available, and it's one of those that's not too expensive. It's available in the 30 ml bottle for $8 at Anderson Pens, and I liked their option of a 3 ml sample for $1.25 too. I found it at Goulet Pens and Jet Pens, and then I found it at Pen Chalet. Although I didn't find a sample there, they also had $8 for a 30 ml bottle and $13.50 for a 90 ml bottle. That's a pretty good deal on a Monteverde ink. So here it is. It goes down to here in the broad nib. It was dry somewhere between 3 and 5 seconds, pretty fast on this paper. And then here it is in the fine nib. It gets just a little bit lighter. You can see that, but it doesn't really lose its readability at all. It was quick to dry. It was 4 seconds to dry on this Rhodia 90 gram paper. This is my Rhodia Gold book, my second ink journal that I'm working on. And then I put it, excuse me, into the 1.1 stub, the Goulet stub, and it darkens and it's quite nice in there. I do see shading throughout. However, I think for the most part, the shading that I got with these nibs was pretty subtle on this paper. But we'll see in a minute, there's some differences. So it was 10 seconds to dry in that great big stub. That wasn't bad at all, because that's a 1.5. This sample came from Pen Friend JS. Thank you very much. I've had it a while now, and I've been wanting to review it. So my first impressions were it's unique, and I really love it. It's got that kind of chalky brown look to it. It kind of reminds me, actually it reminds me of the old Necco candies. There was one that was chocolate in there, and it had that light brownish color that you sometimes can see with this ink when it does that shading, when it does the different colors. Let me hold this up so you can see the ink splatter. That was pretty spectacular. It does get dark, but it goes to a light kind of a, oh, it's hard to really describe that even. It's not quite gray, but it's very interesting. And it did remind me quite a lot of the lighter but still interesting Stone Road of Gion by the Kyoto Tag inks. Let's turn this over. Had just a little bit of bleed through. Well, mostly it was ghosting because it's seepage at best, and it really isn't full bleed through. But with that stub, you can probably see that. But that was it. The rest of it was just shadowing, heavy ghosting maybe. Maybe it tried to bleed through, but it didn't. Okay, so let's get on some other papers. There's my trusty little rack there. Okay, first of all is the CVS caliber paper, very inexpensive little notebook here. And it did kind of show off that darkness. And there is some shading, but it's difficult to, yeah, it starts to get a little flat with the lighting and everything. So, but I'm happy, I'm pleased with how it's coming through there. It's nice and bold, and it is bold. It took a lot longer to dry on this paper than the Rhodia. It was, you know, almost dry at 30 seconds. And then with the fine nib, it did lighten quite a bit, but keep in mind this paper does that. And so that's like a hazard of this paper with some inks, not all of them. It was much happier with the broad nib and with the stub nib. So down at the stub nib, yeah, it was going to take over 30 seconds to dry, whereas with the Lamy Fine nib, it was almost dry at 15 seconds. And it was quite nice, kind of a nice dark brown in that stub. But where I kind of like the lighter aspect of this ink, so I didn't mind it at all in the fine nib. Now, it tried to seep through just where it's painted, but that would not bother me at all. I'll be able to use the back paper. Okay, and then, okay, so this is the very inexpensive office paper, 20-pound copy paper, Georgia Pacific. And it feathers an awfully lot with this. Let's see if we can show that. Dries pretty quick, somewhere around 10 seconds with the broad nib, but there's a lot of feathering there. In the fine nib, if you had to do that, you could get away with it, and you'd be looking at brown. It would look pretty nice, I guess. And then in the stub, same thing, lots of feathering. You can see quite a bit of that around those letters. I think you can see it too. Very quick to dry though. And then when you turn it over, there wasn't as much bleed through as there normally is. It was quite well behaved on this paper. So, and actually, you know, other than a dot here and there was nothing to worry about. So next is Clairefontaine. Have it on a little pocket-sized notebook this time, and a little spread here. Okay, and I noticed some shading here, subtle, but you can really notice it, I think, in the broad nib. And then it did lighten a little in the fine nib, but nothing that really disturbed me. About 15 seconds to dry. I see a tiny bit of a smear, but nothing that would, you know, that would be fairly dry by then, and that wouldn't bother me. So then in the fine nib, 12 seconds to dry. That was completely dry at 12. It was just a tiny smear at 8 seconds. And then much darker in that stub, 1.5 stub, but it looks nice and bold, and you can really, really see it good. So I'm sure there's no bleed through on this, because this is super paper. Let's see. Yeah, even the painted on barely shadowed, so that's really nice. Okay, now we're going into Tomoya River paper. This is the little Birmingham. It's almost pocket size. It's a little small. Okay, and of course this paper is ivory, so it actually is very pleasing color on this ivory paper, I thought. In fact, to me it shows off its nice lighter brown qualities better on this paper. So if you like the ivory colored, or cream, I guess it's cream colored Tomoya River paper, this is 52 GSM. It looked nice on here, and it really did. Let's see, took a long time to dry. We're talking about 30 seconds or more in the broad nib, and then 20 seconds in the fine nib. Yeah, more than 30 in the stub, but I got some interesting shading going on. I hope you can see that. It's very difficult. Well, you could kind of see it in the F at the beginning, and then at the bottom of some of these, not hashtags, figure eights. Looks like I smeared the word too when I was trying to get that, but you know, it's a very artistic color, I think. It could be used in natural scenes, and it's going to make a long-lasting impression, I think, on me. It did come through in the painted on part, but it goes normally in the writing, so it didn't bleed through or anything. That was real nice. Okay, so now 68 GSM Tomoya River paper on the Live Notes from Pen Gallery. Let's get into that. See if I can fold this over a little for you. Again, this was, I thought, a good choice of paper. It doesn't look quite as light on here, but it does look brown. You know, it doesn't get to looking black, not even with the interior lighting and camera. So that's really nice. The shading is very subtle, but it's there in that broad nib. And then it's much lighter in the fine nib. Let's see, we're talking about 25 seconds to dry on this paper with the broad nib, and about 15 seconds with the fine nib. It was odd that it seemed dry at 20 seconds down here in the stub. I thought that was weird. But notice the scrubby where there's a lot of shading going on. That was real pretty. And there's some shading going on in the writing too. Maybe when I first picked up the pen, it was darker. But then as I was writing longer, I started to see some really nice looking little shading at the lower parts and the tops of the hashtags and stuff. Yeah, I wrote down Necco Candy chocolate color. Yeah, it kind of reminded me. It was like a blast from the past. Okay, and it did seep through a little on the painted on, not quite as much as it did over here on the 52 GSM. That came through a lot stronger, but it's still, you know, just a little bit of a annoyance, I guess. But who does that? That's just something that us reviewers do to test the ink, really. Okay, so one more writing sample. That's on Cafe Note, B6 Slim little notebook from Nanami, a paper company. And it had that nice color on here too, I thought. It's, you know, a chalky brown. I've got friends that would really love this. Here it is in the broad nib, in the Serendipity, and then I tested it out in the stub nib, and it looked nice. Shading throughout. Not like a shade monster or anything like that, but nice subtle shading that gives you some variation. Then not so much in the fine nib, but it still looked good. Still looked brown, and it didn't get too light or anything, so that was good. Okay, so now I think, yeah, I've got something to explain to you, but first let's look at some comparisons. Let's look at that. Actually, I gotta make sure. If you make a little adjustment here, I guess we'll get along okay. Okay, so this is it right in the middle, Monteverde Moonstone. And you can see that complexity coming out right on this watercolor paper. 140 pound regular watercolor paper. No, yeah, 140. 300 GSM. Okay, I got to get that straight in my mind. But here's our ink of the day. And then right next to it, I put Rohr and Klinger Sepia because it did remind me of that in color. But this one has a complexity about it, and it has that lighter capacity. It goes quite a bit lighter in its shading and all that kind of thing. And then, I don't know, Pelikan Edelstein Smoky Quartz is so much warmer, but it did make me get that out. It did remind me of it. And then we've got two over here that seem a lot lighter, and yet definitely the Kyoto Tag Stone Road of Gion, that reminded me of it without any, that was just by memory, not without going and flipping through the little cards. It just made me think of it so much. And so, and then down here, this one is 3 Oysters Gogung. Now, that's got complexity, but it has a lot of purple in it instead of blue, and that's going to make it a whole different tone. But it is interesting, I thought. And then even Montegrappa Coffee Brown was a contender. You know, it was in the ballpark, so I put that here. Now, I thought Quellaveco Caramel Brown was a lot darker and more straightforward, just brown without that complexity in it. And Krishna Dark Chocolate is a different kind of a tone. And you could tell that not only by the top part of the card, but how it comes out with the water. It's much of a warmer kind of and it has a very dark brown look. I remember it being very dark coming out of the nib too. And then KWZ Cappuccino, that made the panel too. It doesn't compare exactly apples to apples. It's much warmer. It is different, and it's not going to appear the same in a nib, but I still wanted to put it there so you may be familiar with at least one of these, hopefully. Let's see if you can see those words down. Okay, how about what didn't make the panel, but was interesting? This is a vintage ink that I have that I really thought looked a lot like it, except it's more bulletproof, and it certainly didn't move around. This is Exa Brown. It's a 1950s Hungarian ink. And it did very much remind me of that underlying color. So it made me want to dig out a nib and put it in there. But I wanted to explain I did not have like enough of this left or any of the ones that I really wanted to use. I think the only one I had was Sepia. I didn't have enough to do that comparison that I had done on the last couple inks where I got the Clairefontaine out. Okay, this is J. Arbonne. Uh-oh, I don't have my cheat sheet with me. So it's that French Oh, that's too bad, because I had it memorized for a while there. Anyway, I can't pronounce it, so there it is. But it's a lot warmer, and it's a lot more traditional brown. So that gives you something good to compare it with, if you're familiar with this one. Okay, then here's Sailor, Riku Cha. Okay, that's, I know I'm mangling that, but I don't have my, I had to move because we're having storms, so I had to move away from my desk into another room. So I'm having to film away from my cheat sheets and my bulletin board with all my little words to pronounce them. So I apologize for that. But that's different too. You can tell that's a whole different tone, but it still reminded me of it. Oh, and this one, you know, my memory said pull out that Birmingham tarnished nickel, but then it's like, whoa, we are worlds away, ballparks away, nothing alike. But I still thought, well, if it made me look, it might make you look too. That's got blue and pink, and it's more of a purplish gray, and it's definitely, oh well, that just was a dud, you know, it didn't quite match. Okay, so now the last but not least, I wanted to show you how it came out on the visual journal. You know, it's interesting. It blurred quite a bit because it moves around so much in water, like we saw with the bath test and even the chromatography. It wants to move. So it's not going to stay put for you, really, to do these details unless you're very precise and you get it just when it's dried enough, but not so much that you end up just with dots. Because that's what happens. If you let it dry too much, you're not going to get any effect. You'll just get dots. It looks like you made mistakes all over it. But so I've got some trees, but they're very fuzzy. And then blue comes out, and the lighter aspects of the brown kind of come out. So it was very interesting. And then definitely the dark part comes out. And then over here, it's just kind of a mess. You know, it just basically moved around and everything. But I thought I'd show you anyway. So what do you think of this ink? I actually think it has... Not only would it look good in a nib, if you like kind of a, I want to say dusty brown, because that's kind of how it comes through on some of my papers that I prefer. Like, for instance, in the journal, the Cafe Note, you know, it's very subtle. It doesn't come through as this dark brown. You could still see it. You're not seeing black. And even on the 68 GSM Tomoya River paper, I kind of liked it. It's kind of chalky looking, but very nice. And, you know, Monteverde inks are known for being affordable, and that's really nice. And they're known for not clogging your pens, for, you know, having good flow. So it has something in it. It has some technology in it that helps with that. So I'd love to hear about it in the comments, what you think of this ink. And we're getting really close to 30 inks, 30 days. And I also have a pen allowance, kind of a combination pen allowance and remainder of the channel ad money video to do, to show you a few new acquisitions that I'll be doing. But then I'll be diving right into exploring one ink every day in September. And I'm having a few technical issues, so I got to be real careful what I promise, but I will be bringing you as many videos to follow and report on my 30 inks, 30 days as I can. And I'll also be over on Instagram with that. So I'll see you back here, most likely with the pen allowance video very soon. And I'd love to hear what you think about Monteverde Moonstone. And big thank you to my pen friend for sending this sample a long time ago, and lots of patience. You know, I've had it a long time, and I did get a little backed up with, to say the least, with ink reviews, but I have paused my my Inkflight subscription again. We'll see how long that lasts, because I'm addicted to it, but I had to because I want to make sure I get to the ones that Goulet pens sent and the rest of the ones that pen friends have sent. So I'll let you go. Thank you very much, and bye for now.